Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families.
And I'm Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And we are excited to have you join us as we talk all things faith, family, and fitness. A special thanks to Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency for their support of Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community one family at a time. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. Hey, this is Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families, and I'm joined here today with my lovely wife, Linda. How are you?
Hi, honey. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, So, last week, hon, before we get into all of our show, we did the show called All In, and the idea of being totally committed. And one of the things that we had a disclaimer in there a couple of times of like, okay, now we want you to be all in your marriage, but not if there's abuse.
Right.
And afterward, we started talking about that. So, what was your thought that you came out with?
For those who didn't get a chance to listen, I think that's an important thing we needed to clarify is that we're not telling anyone at any point to stay in an abusive relationship, to put themselves or their family at risk. And so that's really our topic today is the topic of abuse. And it's one, hun, that we're forced to deal with every week with clients and families coming in. And so we just really felt like it was time to dig deeper into the about it on the air.
Yeah, and so there are lots of different forms of abuse, and we're going to get into some of those. But so often abuse is just not easy to detect. And we see it. I worked in the elementary school for 20 years, and the statistics always bear out that, like 1 in 5 people will be abused. And I think the number of kids that were abused under my watch, and I never caught it. Yeah. Because it just never really showed itself.
Right. And it's a difficult topic to talk about, just like we talked about several weeks ago with racism. It's a difficult conversation, but, hun, I think you and I have said and committed that we're no longer going to be silent about important topics. Just because, and we're not going to be ignorant. We're not going to let that be our excuse. And so I think it's time to kind of call out the ugly truth in our society and bring some light into the darkness.
Yeah, so very good. So we do have a guest, but before we get into our guest, I think we need to do a little bit of bill paying. Yeah. Always love to do that bill paying. So we would first like to thank Mansfield Insurance Agency. They have built a fine reputation and business on caring, listening, and protecting their customers. Mansfield Insurance Agency began in 1981 by Jim Mansfield and is dedicated to serving individuals and businesses in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. If you have an insurance need, call Mansfield Insurance Agency at 800-230-3927. I almost got choked up in the middle of that one. Man,
Mansfield just does that to you.
I'm telling you, yeah.
We also want to thank Maxwell Construction that was founded in 1988 by John Maxwell. And Maxwell Construction has grown and expanded to become one of the most recognized commercial construction companies in the tri-state. So if you have any kind of construction need, please call Maxwell Construction today at 1-812-537-2200.
All right, very good. A couple of announcements. Just, we've talked before, hon, and we're on a push to do this, and the idea of getting people to hear our message and support our ministry. And, you and I both, hon, we know we're not very good salespeople. We don't like to do the ask, but, we are believing more and more strongly every day in the mission. Yeah. The families that come in here, the reason why we exist, what our heart beats for is to keep marriages strong, keep families strong, restore marriages, and just have a sense that we're doing the right thing. And so we do ask that you, if your heart beats for your family and you want to see things improve in this country and in this world, that we start taking care of our families in a whole lot better way. And so for that reason, if you have that same shared vision for family health, then we ask that you come alongside of us. We need you at Rock Solid Families. We need your help. We need your support. I just had a show recently with Rocky Boyman, and Rocky is a local Cincinnati celebrity on WLW, and we talked about what ails us in this country is not politically driven, or it's not racially driven even. It's family driven. Yeah. It's a breakdown of the family, and that doesn't mean there aren't other issues, but a lot of those are symptoms of much greater greater issue. And in large part, that is a family breakdown.
And Hun, you mentioned your other podcasts, and many of those that are listening may not know that you and Kyle Crawford, a younger dad. I always like to mention
you were getting ready to say younger, better looking.
No, I didn't
I
say
think
that.
you were getting ready to say.
But Strong Dads is another podcast that we put out weekly, and it's all about dads. And so if you are out there and have that interest, we would love for you to check that out on all of the major platforms that you find Rock Solid Radio in. You can also find Strong Dads. Hun, let's get into a little bit of some disclaimers, because I think this is what's kind of held us back from speaking about the topic. If you just started to tune in, we're talking about the tough topic of abuse. And so one of the reasons we haven't tackled it, Hun, is because it is so huge and it stretches out over so many areas. So to generalize it, I feel like we would be missing the mark and not hitting where people need to be helped. And so, but that's not a reason to avoid the topic.
Right.
You know? Right.
And opening up the topic also gets very messy. I will say from the school background that I came from, when we did recognize signs of abuse, and in that case, usually, to children, we knew right away we better have our ducks in a row because this is going to get messy. And people, even the people who are getting hurt from the abuse, they potentially can get even greater pain and hurt when this all gets exposed. And so the whole thing is really messy. But like you said, hon, it's not the reason to avoid it, because the long-term scars and impact are even messier.
Yeah. And so no doubt the subject is going to elicit an emotional response from a lot of our listeners. And so whether you have been a victim of abuse or you have been accused of abuse, I really would ask you to really reflect on this show and think about, okay, why am I getting all worked up about it? Why is this pushing my buttons? And so if this is something that is really triggering emotions for you, I ask for you to, one, figure out the why, and then get some help for the why, okay? And so that's what we're hoping. I have been praying, Hun, and oh my goodness, as we introduce our guest, Satan is trying really, really hard to not let this show come out. This message is something that is needed to be told, and Satan is going to try any way possible to keep it from happening.
It's so funny you say that, because we literally are recording it almost 45 minutes later than what we were planned to, because I was stuck in a traffic jam.
Yep. And so as we unpack this topic, can I just tell you right now, if you are listening and this story is yours, there is victory over abuse, okay? There is hope for a better future. And so please, I want you to hear that. So with that being said, Hun, my good friend.
Let's get to it. Come on.
We have a really dear old friend.
My gosh. This is what I deal with.
Nice.
This is what I deal with.
Now wait a second.
She's older than me.
Emma? Oh, yeah. So, we want to introduce a friend of ours who we've known for years and years, and she has really been involved now in an important role in our community, working for an organization called Safe Passage. And so we want to just welcome and introduce Beth Kroger. So thanks, Beth, for coming in.
Oh, it is
Hello,
my
Beth.
privilege.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you guys so much for inviting us. You are absolutely right. It is a tough subject to wade into the waters of. And most importantly, I heard the words victory, I heard hope, and that is exactly what there is on the other side of this. In the midst of it, Safe Passage is an organization based out of Batesville. It has a beautiful story that founded it. It was really a group of friends that got together one night, and one had to leave. And for the first time, that group of friends was able to recognize that there was something going on in their friend's life.
Wow.
And as they reached out for help to start investigating, they learned very quickly, even through the state, that southeastern Indiana was the least supported area in the entire state for victims of domestic violence. They learned that there were more services available for abused animals than women and children.
How long ago
at that
was that,
time.
Beth?
That was back in the 90s.
Okay.
And so, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long ago.
No,
when you
not at
look
all.
at our age and how
old
I apparently
No. Maybe I should have said dear sweet
older
friend.
We've known each other a long time.
Long time,
That's
yeah,
what she means.
So Beth, what is your role there at Safe Passage?
My title is case manager. But at Safe Passage, we have several different services. One is residential services, where we have a shelter available located in Batesville. And that is for women that may not have a safe place to flee to. They need that space to go to where they can heal, receive services. But lots of people do have safe places. They have family that can support them, or maybe the abuser has been removed from the home.
Gotcha.
And we have mostly what I do then is called non-residential services. So it's kind of receiving the very same services but in the community.
Yeah.
And all of those services include domestic violence education. They include some legal advocacy. Although we are not attorneys, we can't give legal advice. We can sit beside you in court. We can assist you with some of the paperwork. We also offer sexual assault support services, and we offer quite a few prevention services. One of the most important things we do, though, is safety planning with you. If you find yourself in this situation, we're going to talk about what you need to do to get safe right now.
Yeah, and you know that situation that we're talking about, in your case that you're working with is mostly spousal abuse, domestic violence relationships. But obviously, hun, we know that their abuse can range in so many different areas that, you know, sometimes it's beyond our understanding of the extent of that damage that can be done. Beth, can you just speak into some kinds of abuse that you see or hear? Because sometimes when we think of abuse, we think of somebody getting beat, right? A child or a spouse, but that's not always the case, is it?
Absolutely, it is not always the case. Actually, some of the physical violence will come later in a relationship. And what we see very commonly is verbal abuse. That can grow into emotional abuse. The way I describe that to people that are kind of having trouble separating that is if you're old enough to remember the old tape recorders where you could record your own little tape. The verbal abuse is somebody making that tape for you. They're saying things to you. The emotional and psychological abuse then is that tape is playing on repeat in your brain. And you kind of start absorbing that self-talk. Over time, it becomes difficult for you to remember who you were, the truth of your beautiful identity, your worth, and that you don't deserve to be talked to that way. But I would be remiss if I did not mention one of the biggest tools for abuse is financial power over someone.
You were saying that earlier. Tell me a little bit about what you're talking about, because I think Merrill, you know, doesn't give me as much money as I think I should have.
Oh my gosh! Now that's totally a setup because she handles the checkbook. Okay,
so
we really can flip the script.
I'm making
on that
a joke
one.
out of a very serious topic because obviously there's a lot of people out there that might say, "Oh, well, yeah, I don't get as much." But tell us what you're talking about with that.
It has several different ways that it looks. So one could be she's not allowed to work, or he's not allowed to work outside of the home, where that isolation starts happening.
Control.
They don't have control over the finances. They may receive an allowance, but that allowance may not be enough for them to survive on, take care of the kids. They may need to ask for more money. And that may open up that verbal abuse. See,
power, control.
It is. It all really does come down to power and control. Very often financial abuse, we see that if she's able to work, that money gets deposited into an account that only he has control over. It looks very different in relationships, but it does come down to that power and control. And ultimately, that's what makes her stay, that she doesn't have the resources to get out. So we have shelter.
Yeah, so, man, I hear a lot of things with that, but there's a lot of questions that are coming into my mind, and maybe these are things that you're thinking about as well that you're going to cover. But, you know, one of the things that, well, first off, especially in our business, we're looking for signs, because unless they flat out come out and say, I'm being abused, are there some signs? Or even like the person who's being abused, sometimes they don't even recognize that, that's probably abuse. That's
absolutely. There's some red flags.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So some of those, when you do talk about that person that's being abused, it may have been modeled in their childhood. And so that's the way normal relationships work. And it may even, you hear things like, well, that's just the way we talk to each other. And
sarcasm. We see that so often.
Sarcasm is a favorite. So this is kind of opening up the toolbox of what an abuser uses. And some of the red flags that we try to alert people to is I tell them, yes, you are in this relationship. You know this person better than anybody, but these are healthy red flags for anybody.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the person you're sitting next to at the ball game, or you meet in a community meeting.
Right.
So jealousy is a big one. So, and it is kind of expressed at times with, who were you with? What were you doing? Will you spend more time with them? It could really be about family and moms and sisters. And I know you talk about me when you're with them. So it starts this isolation process.
Yeah, and in that I think comes, and I think they're probably on your list too, is that manipulation and control of, you know, you're not allowed to talk to that person. You're not allowed to go over to your mom's house. That's that trying to manipulate the situation because of maybe out of jealousy, but maybe just out of power.
Out of power. And we don't often see it in the beginning of you aren't allowed to, because that does create a defense mechanism. You can't tell me what to do. But we see the manipulation come in with the way, well, I know your mom doesn't like me. She never liked me. And so it creates this shame, this guilt when I am away from him. It can be technology is a great tool for abuse. If you are out with friends, the constant text messaging where it makes you feel like you can't be away from them, that it's just easier to stay home. Yeah, it's just easier to stay home because the whole time I'm out there, they're just driving me crazy with the phone anyway.
Yeah, I see this grooming process where they share these deep personal things and this vulnerability of, I need you, you got to respond, you got to be here with me, and it sucks them in and it grabs their heart. And then, like you said, there's this guilt and shame and all of these things that kind of come into play.
Right. We call that quick involvement. So somebody that's a manipulator and wants that power and control, if they are losing that power and control with someone else, they're going to find someone, when that relationship's over, they need to get quickly involved with someone else. So you hear, we're crazy in love, they're my soulmate, you don't understand. It kind of becomes this us against the world mentality.
Yeah. Tell us about gaslighting. You and I were talking about that a little earlier. That's another red flag that some people never heard that term before, but I think they've seen it.
They have seen it. So that's actually where the abuser is able to make you start questioning what was real. So they're able to say things like, I was just kidding. Can't you take a joke? Why are you so stupid? Things like that. It's
it's turning the tables on you. You know, we just recently talked a little bit about narcissism, and it's such a narcissistic trait, right? Yeah, it's just like, no, I'm not wrong. You must be misunderstanding me.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that makes you start questioning your own sense, if you can trust yourself, your own sense of judgment, to the point where, I don't know, do I want to watch this show or that show? What do I cook for dinner? It's this sense of living on eggshells.
Yeah.
That's really a sign that you're really in an abusive situation. In the beginning, it can be, you think in your mind, I want to make them happy.
Right.
But if you kind of boil it down, it's really about living on eggshells.
Right.
Because you don't want to make the wrong decision, because you'll be in trouble if you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be so hard in your role, Beth, to try to help shine some light on this really distorted image that this woman or man, but you deal with mostly women, that have already exposed in their mind, and they can't figure it out, and you are speaking truth into this, and they don't sometimes want to hear it or don't see it, right?
Exactly. Sometimes they just are not ready. A lot of those people come to us through the legal system. It's a requirement for some of the legal situations that they find themselves in. And for me, that's just a great opportunity to start planting some seeds of truth in their life. They may not accept it right now, but over time, something will happen and they'll be, oh, That's what she was talking about. Oh, I recognize that a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Beth, don't you, as we're talking about the legal part, it kind of comes into my mind. Don't you think part of the problem is that much of the abuse that happens is on the books technically not illegal, right? It's not illegal to call somebody a name. It's not illegal to text somebody. And don't you think that sometimes makes a gray area for whether the lady in this case, well, I don't know, I don't like it, but it's really not illegal.
They haven't laid a hand on it.
Right. They have. I mean,
Exactly.
versus if it's illegal, it's a little bit easier to involve the law, and it's more cut and dry.
Exactly.
Yes, it is, or it's not. But abuse gets into a really weird phase. I mean, in the school system, our problem when we called the authorities in, if they couldn't prove it,
Right.
Okay, if they couldn't prove it, whether it be a mark or something that had physical evidence, it just wasn't. We couldn't go very far with it. Okay,
Right.
So where does that come into play with your work? Legal versus illegal, confusion, all of these things.
Again, physical abuse can often come later in the relationship. A lot of abusers are smart enough to use all the other tools.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll hear people say, we don't hear a physical abuse. We hear, he never laid his hands on me. But all these other abusive tactics exist. And, it really does take someone to speak truth to them. That is abuse. That's not a healthy relationship. Those are not safe boundaries. And where it is most important, in my mind, of course, we want the woman to be safe, but we're teaching children how to interact with each other. We're teaching children what to expect from a partner when they grow up. And this really comes down to changing legacies.
Yeah.
Before it does get into the legal situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much is there, here we are in a Christian ministry, and, you hear scripture misused all the time.
Absolutely.
And one of the misuses is wives should submit to their husband. And so oftentimes, as you talked before, this is why this came to my mind, you talked about the man having power or control over the lady, and she doesn't resist it because somewhere in her upbringing she thought she was supposed to be submissive. Can you help us kind of figure out, how does she know what does healthy submission and unhealthy submission look like?
That's a tough question. That's an easy one.
Yeah,
well, I teed you right up there. Come on.
You sure did. So I am going to put my own disclaimer in here. This will be Beth speaking as a Jesus girl. Safe Passage does not have a religious statement or affiliation. So this is my opinion. So thank you for asking me that. However, I think that when you are submitting, that is a call to model Jesus.
Yes.
And everything that he did was from a place of love. And when you can trust the boundaries and the relationship and the intention of the person, submission has a very different meaning to you.
Wow.
It becomes following someone that you trust, as opposed to bowing down under power because of a title they may have or positional perception that they have or a rigid gender role that they're using for manipulation and abuse.
That was good. That was off the cuff.
That was off the
very good.
cuff.
And I think you
amazing.
mentioned something there, the idea that you submit to the idea of someone being Jesus-like. What Jesus is called. His job was to love us, right? And we were to submit to him. And so, if the lady is not feeling loved, if she's not being taken care of, if that's not the case,
healthy relationship.
Then that's not,
they have not earned the right to be submitted to.
And Beth, we're going to move on to some next steps. But before I do, I want to speak to the listener out there, because part of the abuser's tactic is to find the vulnerable, to find the weak, to get to that vulnerable place and then use it against them. they will kind of put that shame and guilt in there, and they will fight dirty. They're not afraid to throw you under the bus to protect and save them and look better. And so if we find ourselves in an abusive relationship, hun, and this is what you talked about with the generations of children and stuff, like we've got to arrest that and stop that and figure out the why. Why am I allowing myself, and we see patterns, not just in the abuser, but in the victims, over and over again, where these women are attracted to these narcissistic power players and they're manipulators, and they're not stopping that cycle of dysfunction and getting help so that they can take that next step toward healing as well as their abuser. And so we're going to talk about next steps, Beth, because I definitely don't want to leave our listeners with just feeling overwhelmed by this darkness. So let's talk about what's the next step. If there's someone listening and maybe you're not being abused, but man, God is putting you in the position of seeing someone in the darkness that maybe you can bring light to. So what would be some next steps?
Well, I think that darkness seems to have a secret power. So take it out of the dark. You've got to bring it into the light. Of course, that's with a trusted resource. I'm going to, I work with Safe Passage, and we have a 24-hour, 365-day, it doesn't matter, holiday or not, we have a crisis line. And the thing that is so impressive about this crisis line is it's not a 1-800 number that rings in Texas or California. It rings in Batesville, Indiana. They are girls that I work with every single day. They are people that I know, that I love, that are fantastic, and understand what a privilege it is to receive that phone call in somebody's darkest, most questioning time in their life. And so speak it out. Call that number.
Can you give us that number?
Absolutely.
And again, if you're listening, man, for you to write this number down, maybe not for this moment for you, but maybe someone else that needs to hear this. And you can also, I think, search this under Safe Passage, can't you?
Yes,
online?
safepassageinc.org is our webpage.
Yeah.
And then our phone number is 877-733-1990. And we all take turns answering that. You may call, and it'll be me that answers the phones one
are
day.
You Beth?
Yes. It may be me, but for the most part, these are girls. This is what they have chosen to do for a living, to enter into this arena to help people get to the other side in victory. And I would encourage you, often if you call and say, it's my friend, she needs shelter, it is a voluntary service. So the person that is in that situation has to call themselves, so we know that they are seeking the help, the information, even if they aren't fully ready to engage in services. They just have questions. Is this really abuse? Okay, I need to process that before I can really start talking about it. So I would just encourage you, that's the jumping off point, is to call that number.
And so while you're saying that, unlike if I suspect my neighbor's being abused, and I have reason to believe that, I can call that, not to you, but to the police. So if you saw somebody being abused,
absolutely,
then you can call the police.
Actually, we're required by law.
Right.
We are mandatory reporters, and so we're held liable if we are aware of abuse going on and under our nose, whether it be a student, whether it be a neighbor, and we were made aware of that, and we didn't do anything about that. Man, it could come back to haunt us. Actually, as a Christ follower, man, I couldn't live with myself if I did not take action about something I was concerned about.
The tricky part is
911.
That's
what they're there for, and it's not our job to be detectives.
Right.
It's our job to enter into
provide
that initial
the resource
and provide the resource. So, but you can call if you say, I think it's my friend. What are some things I can say? What are some things I can do? You're welcome to call that phone number, of course.
So you could help coach a friend through the helping process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you can't actually go report or do anything like that because it's not them directly.
So you are not going, as Safe Passage, we are not going to sit down and do our full domestic violence services with you as the best friend of someone who's being abused.
Okay.
Right.
But I would be remiss if I didn't mention as well, our services are 100% free.
Wow.
And so it really does knock down a lot of barriers for people where that might be a concern,
Yeah.
especially if he is controlling the money.
Financial abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they are also 100% confidential. We are, one of the things our government has done very well has put a federally mandated confidentiality law in place. It is a federal law that we as Safe Passage employees, anybody that's working in that domestic violence world, cannot be subpoenaed. We can be, but we have a law that says, sorry, they aren't going to show up and testify in court. We aren't going to tell your business.
Yes. Okay.
So it is the safest place you'll have to tell your story. To figure out how do I navigate these waters until you're actually ready. It can be very, very dangerous to be in the planning stage of leaving, and we know that. So we really do have resources and planning stages that we can work with somebody to help them before they're ready to leave.
And that's an important point, because we see a lot of people, they're like, they just need to leave. They just need to leave. But as they prepare to leave and that abuser finds out, man, sometimes they can get to a point where they won't let you away. And if they find out you're planning on it, it could be the most dangerous part of this whole process, can it?
It absolutely is the most dangerous part, because if you have someone that thrives on power and control and they sense that that's starting to slip away, they're going to amp up their game. They're going to start pulling out the big tools from the toolbox. And the game gets more and more serious to them.
Which is why, if at all possible, you need to get away from the abuser. You need to cut off all communication, all relationship, because here's the deal. They will try to manipulate and twist through texting or emails or phone calls, whatever they can get a hold of. Maybe children. Maybe you physically are away from them, but man, if you're still communicating with them, they still have some power over you. So cut that off.
If you can.
If you
Absolutely.
can.
And so where that becomes very tricky is with children.
Yes.
And parents, the abuser is very often able to plant seeds in the children's mind. You know, oh, you have a bedtime at mommy's house. We don't do that here. This is the fun house. I would encourage everyone that is in an abusive situation, obviously, to leave. For the children as well, staying in an unhealthy relationship is not the right decision for kids. But there's all kinds of court-appointed apps that you can download on a phone. The communication happens through those applications. It's a text messaging that goes into a central system and then shoots back out. They're all recorded.
Wow.
Okay.
So there are safe ways. We aren't saying that, you know, this abusive relationship between two adults, that the children can never ever see that abuser again. They may even have some legal rights that they can get.
That's what I because that can get pretty messy. So help us out a little bit. In the case that the lady has no place to go to, she doesn't have a mom or any, or, you know, the grandparents around. She has kids.
Yes.
You said leave, so she comes to you. Do the kids come to Safe Passage as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then what is the legal, because if there's no divorce or any kind of legal custody separation, then that means dad has every right to those children as well. How does all of that, because I can see all this, these can be roadblocks for, you know what, I'm not even going to call Safe Passage, because this is going to really get crazy with my kids.
Yes, so Safe Passage actually is a very secure facility. We do ask clients to keep the address confidential. So hopefully dad is not really aware of where they are until we can help work through those safety plans. That does require some legal intervention very often. And that's up for the courts to decide. So we also need to make sure, and it gets very, very confusing, messy, dad may not have parental rights. And so there's all kinds of legal nuances. Just because you're the biological parent, you may not have had your name on the birth certificate. It gets really crazy. And so that's why we take the hard line of we don't give legal advice because there's so many nuances.
Yeah.
But don't assume that an abuser has all kinds of rights because they will have told you.
Yes, of course.
They will have told you
Yes.
what their rights are. And I don't know where they got their information.
Yeah.
It may not be true. And so Safe Passage has rooms, a kitchen, you live there, and it gives you the space to start sorting through that type of information.
And it is important to surround yourself with healthy boundaries, healthy people, to keep your circle small. Be very careful with sharing details about how you're feeling or what your plan is with shared friends or family members that maybe would turn on you because of that manipulation play, right? And go back to the abuser. So it's really, really important that you only go to trusted people, a safe space, like you said, call that hotline number. Get help for the why. There is a reason why you've allowed that person to worm his way into your life, those empty places in your heart, trying to fill it with an unhealthy person. So please get some professional help for the why you've been in this place of vulnerability to allow yourself to not feel loved and worth more than what you've been getting in your relationships.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those boundaries are key to healing. And,
I'm a boundary girl, man. I'm all about boundaries.
All about the boundaries.
Yeah.
And to have hope in all of this. And that's really what we try to, through the help, give the hope and healing for survivors. And our services are available to anyone. We know that domestic violence has no boundaries. We're talking about boundaries. That is a monster that has no boundaries. It doesn't care what color your skin is, what your W-2 was last year, what your address is.
What about gender?
Well, I was just going to say, because we've also seen in our business, we've seen men abused.
Absolutely.
So does Safe Passage offer any service or resource to men?
Now, our services are available to anyone that is a victim of violence, of domestic violence. So regardless of gender, we see men and women, regardless of sexual orientation. If you are a victim, you are a victim, and you qualify for our services.
Wow.
Okay.
So Beth, as we close our today's show, I really just want to kind of give you a chance to, what would be your challenge for our listeners? What do you want them to walk away with as we kind of hit this important topic? And again, we could be here all week on so many different angles and avenues, but again, it's not the reason to be silent. So what's the most important things that you would want to kind of share, leave our listeners with as a challenge through all this?
I think that I find myself saying very often, it's not your fault. I hear a lot of, why does he do this? I don't know. I'm not a narcissist. I'm not an abuser. I can't begin to think that way. And we would really spend so much time trying to figure out the why of an abuser, when really what we need to do is start looking at the options of healing, what the hope is, because you felt as an abused person, it feels like there's no options. And we're here to say, we are here for you, and we will stand beside you and take you through those options. There's hope.
Yeah, and as believers, you and I are sisters in Christ. Merrill's a brother in Christ. But
come on.
In our journey as
There's
Christ
that abuse
followers,
thing I was telling you about.
But in our journey as Christ followers, you and I, and Merrill and I, we have seen the victories that have come when God is brought into the center of that healing process, when we allow Him to get into those empty places that we have been trying to fill with unhealthy people or behaviors or choices. And man, there is some victory in that. And we are here to say there is victory. There is a better life that God has planned for you. It does not have to settle for this.
When you know what your identity is based on and who your kingdom father is, it really does change your worth, your value, and it changes the way we see ourselves and what we demand for ourselves. And it is something better.
Well, Beth, we want to thank you so much for coming in. I think, as Lynn, as you said, I know this was laid on your heart. That's why we really went down the road of tackling this subject. It's an extremely important topic. One of the things that Rock Solid is all about is the healing, not for just the moment, but for the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned that a little bit through the show. man, what are we going to leave our kids? And so thank you for your work with Safe Passage.
My privilege.
And whatever we can do at Rock Solid to kind of team up or help, we want to be part of that. It's a win-win for everybody if we're doing the right thing here. So we do need to close out, and so for that we want to say thank you to Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency for coming alongside of Rock Solid Families and Rock Solid Radio and supporting what we do here. We also want to continue to encourage, if you believe in our mission, please get out there and preach our name. Tell people about us. As Linda said, give us a 5-star rating. Because as I shared in a previous show, messages are going to get out. You want them to be good ones or bad ones, and so we have an opportunity here that we believe is a very good message. So please help us get that out. So, Hon, why don't you sign us out?
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth, for coming in.
Thank
I love you and your husband and your family, and we're just so thankful for you and your ministry, this important ministry to families. So again, please share the show on your wall. It may not have been for you. Maybe it's someone in your circle of influence that needs to hear this message. And so that's what we're here for. We believe the Holy Spirit laid this on our heart for a reason. And so we would love to know if that was you. So thanks for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. For help or more information about what you've heard on today's show, contact us at rocksolidfamilies.org or call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. Again, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency. If you have questions you'd like answered on our show or you want to chime in on something you heard, go to our Facebook page, Rock Solid Families. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tune in next week for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, and for my husband Merrill and I, thanks for tuning in to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time.